Um, how do you see us contributing to what is happening worldwide as individuals or as concerned citizens of the world?
Uh, so, so bunch of things come to awareness, Bunty. I mean, while these are placeholders, they're placeholders of what needs to be done, irrespective of who does it.
Yeah.
So that needs to be brought into awareness. And then the question is, if this needs to be done, who will do it, and how do we either we do it or we nudge people to do it, right?
Okay.
So again, coming from the space of pure layman on this and not as an expert, I believe that the first thing that we want to do and achieve is de-escalation. I don't think that the world will ever be prepared for any kind of a nuclear or a full-blown war, where there are axis of power siding and they are, in full-blown military engagement. So de-escalation definitely needs to be done. The second is that aid needs to be brought in, medical aid, food supplies for people who are affected. That needs to be put in place. In places that have been affected by bombing or by these kind of things, the essential services need to be as rapidly restored as possible. A conflict intelligence-based commitment to a time-bound resolution has to be put in place, which involves multiple actors within the groups that are engaged and the external groups. Of course, some of these may sound like the old school book, because these are experiments that have been run. And I'm also reminded of an interview that Yuval Noah Harari actually gave this morning to Japanese television on the conflict. And his point was that uh, a lot of escalations that one has seen in the last decade or so, whether it's a form of a rise of a certain power in within a nation, different nations of the world, or the conflicts that are there, a lot of it is actually an assertion against the liberal order that was being created, or said that that order needs to be in place. So what Yuval Harari was saying is, there are a certain group of people, a large number of people who perhaps do not believe in what is called as the weird. Weird is an acronym coined by an interesting researcher from Harvard called Joe Hendrick. Weird stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, elite kind of thing, or people not just elite, but people who believe in this rubric. So what Yuval was perhaps hinting at is a lot of people do not believe that that is the model that they want for their country or the world. We need a certain different revision to it.
Oh,
And his point was that what most actors are ending up doing, what most leaders are ending up doing, as an assertion against it, is to quickly rush to destabilize that order, but they don't have another order in place. So if you destabilize the existing order, it's going to lead to disorder and chaos. And if you don't have a solution to it, then obviously it can get ugly. So bringing back to the points that we were trying to build, conflict intelligence based commitment to a peaceful resolution, knowing fully well that it has to be different from the old school book. How it will be brought about, I'm not the right person to answer that thing. I think while all this is happening, there is also a possibility of there needs to be something to avoid an internal collapse within those engaged groups or nations, so that there is no bad form of coup or capture by certain interest groups that wants to take it in a certain direction. That needs to be definitely worked upon. And I think while all this is happening, there is some immediate runway that needs to be created for providing an economic backstop to people who are affected, because their livelihood, their earnings are clearly displaced because of this, which creates a lot of fear and anxiety. So these are the bunch of things that will need to be done. Uh, 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 Now the question is, how can you and I do this? And honestly, I don't have an answer to it. We could either support strongly people who are slightly more reflective thinkers and their views on social media. Uh, and I know when I make that statement, I'm also wary of the fact that uh, uh, how do you understand the exploratory depth and the explanatory depth of the influencer that you're trying to support? It's very difficult. Uh, and I don't want to name names because I don't want to put out uh, people that I want others to support. But that is clearly one thing that people can do, is support these people who are trying to bring these 4 or 5 things in place. People who are talking about these things instead of aggravating the situations. Um, but the second way is, I think, if there are, I'm sure there are a lot of groups now cropping up to provide aid for restoration of utilities wherever possible. Um, uh, or providing economic backstop, uh, identifying these groups and supporting them in the best possible way one can. Um, yeah, these are some initial thoughts that come to my mind, Bunty. I know they are not immediately. I mean, you won't be able to look at this and the next minute you'll be able to go and action them, any of them. But these are initial thoughts that come to my mind.
I like the humanity of the solutions that you are proposing that we should all think of. Again, I would go back to intent being very important. If the intent is to bring about peace, then the chances of all of us agreeing and contributing in whatever way we can. There is no little, even if one life is affected or easier for a moment, I think is it's worth it. At any point in history, I think it is always worth it. As far as I'm concerned, we are close to the end of the conversation of sorts, but there are two big thoughts that I seem to have on that. One is uh, I want to go on record saying that we are not trying to trivialize something which is physically and financially and emotionally and is very harrowing for one set of people or maybe both sets of people. Because I think in a war there is no winner per se. Whoever wins also has to stay with the not only just the spoils of war, but also with the consequences of what they do, the damage that they do to their internal journeys. Uh, so this discussion is in due respect to everyone who's really at the receiving end of something which is very difficult to understand. The reason of having this topic to speak about was uh, primarily to understand our own emotions and our own feelings about this subject rather than pontificate upon what others should be doing or how peace will come about for 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people out there or what the leaders should be doing. Uh, like you said, we are not plugged into the source code enough for us to sit down in judgment or even offer any kind of conclusive help to even one person, forget the multitude. That is something that I want to actually put on record while we are talking this because of the nature of the subject itself. Uh, there are there are a lot of people who might see it and might feel that we are trivializing it by uh, the context you brought up in terms of our inner conflicts and inner wars. So while they are work in progress and that perhaps should be picked up by everyone at their own pace and time, like you mentioned in your earlier talk with me, uh, at no point are we saying that is the only way to look at it. That is Hemant's way to look at it, and Bunty may concur with it or not. And we are trying to figure out our own internal journey vis-a-vis what is happening around us. That was one point that I wanted to bring up. The other thing that I'm thinking is while we may not have an answer to uh, this huge issue of, now I will call it conflict, because there is conflict within neighbors, within religions, and within countries defining land spaces. And the one conflict we do have a handle on is within ourselves. And in that context, whatever you and I have spoken, if there is a any listener of this conversation intent on finding out more about themselves and going and doing the hard work, because it is hard work, it requires a lot of undoing one's thoughts and emotions about the subject. We cannot, at least I can speak for myself, I do not think that things are causeless. I am here not by chance. There is a certain reason why I have my thoughts and my questions and my particular ideas about a subject, and I am a work in progress, like you did mention about yourself, and I think we are all works in progress. um, and yet the war within is something that one does not cannot wish away. It is something that is going to stay, and even while we were having this conversation, there have been several points that I would want to sit with, and funnily enough, most of them seem to do with me. That, oh, is this how I look at things? So you mentioned that circle of how things are going, where everybody's actions are affecting somebody else, and they are reacting, and those reactions are further fueling uh, another round of actions, reactions from everyone. These are my words. So obviously, you use different words. I started to think that, okay, so then this responsibility on me being the best version of me, as much as I can see my part in understanding the source code, should be the effort should be a lot more, because one person is no longer inconsequential. I am responsible for the space and time that I'm taking on earth, in terms of taking the resources and uh, using them, having been blessed with the mind that I have been. Is this the best I can do? And I realize, no, there's a lot of work that can be done, and consciously I should make an effort to be a better version of myself, sheerly for the fact that I can make a difference to certain things, even if I do not, uh, or does not seem as of right now that I can make an impact on the rest of the world in a big way. So these are some contemplations that arose when you were talking, because, and so, funnily enough, again, they are worldly, at the same time they are very personal. That unless I do this, I cannot take care of this, and unless I keep uh, like my cognizance has to cover the entire thing while I am doing this. So I keep on knowing the relation that I have with the world and the world has with me, and continuing to do it rather than go into a cave and sit and have my own views about it. I enjoy the fact that I have to sit here and be at the receiving end of my either knowing or not knowing in that case. Um, your thoughts on, perhaps your last thoughts, if you want to sum up how this conversation is going.
Yeah. So absolutely, Bunty. In fact, depending on the cosmology and belief systems that we each have, or as they are evolving, will make our next set of choices and actions. Uh, but in some cosmology and belief system, uh, if we were to believe that some people's actions and decisions have far-reaching impact on the lives of many more people on the planet, and then if we were to say that such people are either in the leadership positions, business, politics, or social, or somebody who have hands on exponential technology, to cause a disruption. Then the question is, how do we engage them? Uh, they're not going to give up their power. Nobody's asking them to give up their power. I think they'll need to give up their earlier versions and transform. What can bring about those transformation? Is it outside accountability? But is there a room for us asking questions? Is there a room for asking genuine questions to people in power? Uh, and it could be your society secretary, it could be your patriarchal head of the family, it could be uh, your community head, or it could be a political head or a business head. Uh, I believe that uh, again, and some of these are not new things in our civilization. These things have been recurring since time immemorial. Uh, uh, so one bucket of activity or pursuits could be about self. Uh, the other bucket of activity is how do we improve the rules, norms, incentives in society, which is the structures. Uh, what mechanisms can we put in place to engage leaders so that they transform, they go on the journey of transformation also? Or is there a way where if we believe that they're not going to take up those journeys, could there be peaceful transfer of powers instead of violent transfer of powers or violent transfer of resources, opportunities, and outcomes? Again, these are things which are experiments happening in humanity for long, and we are going to be doing some more experiments. So, signing up for people who are working in that direction, aside from working oneself, is also another way where one can contribute to. There are guys like Daniel Schmachtenberger in America running the Consilience Project, or Jordan Hall running the Civium Project, or Game B project run by Jim Rutt, or Jonathan Haidt running the Heterodox Academy, or the New Economic Thinking think tank in New York. Or so there are 1,000 such projects happening around the world. Uh, uh, there are projects happening in India. People are trying to relook at the refined interpretations of religious texts and not the dogmatic interpretations. Uh, People like Dr. Kundan Singh, uh, Professor Sunil Maheshwari from IIM Ahmedabad, Dr. Pradeep Khanwala, who wrote an interesting book recently, How Do We Get to the Next Level of Civilization? Dr. Pradeep Khanwala from IIM Ahmedabad. So I think one is the work on self, and then also trying to support people who are working in this direction or becoming part of them, with a caveat that even what they're holding is beta conclusions, right? And they're run as experiments. Because if we get over indexed and over convinced about them, then I don't think we are understanding the nature of the predicament that we are dealing with. That's my last thought, Bunty.
Yeah. Thank you, Hemant. I think we did not lose the thread of personal and global at any point, including your last answer. And it is beautiful that you mentioned these names and people who are doing work. One of the things that I find very, very heartening and inspiring is even on a bad day, I can look up to certain people and say, okay, there is work there being done. I wasn't aware of, for example, there's a course and under the subject of the greater good, somebody thinks about this is good enough for me to start with saying, okay, there are people working on it. Personally, I've been lucky through the podcast to meet a lot of people who are doing work on very, very basic things like alternative education. And there was a scientist, I think, who's come back from US and is trying to do something which is experiential learning. Uh, I'm very keen to keep track of what other people are doing, because that also gives us a lot of strength on days when our own journeys are uh, jittery, if I may use the term. So thank you for this conversation. I do not think we are anywhere near the end of the conversation in the truest sense of the term. But there are a lot of little things that one can go back to and contemplate on. And even as we were speaking, I realized we are still nowhere close to the depth of thought that is required on a subject matter of this importance. All of humanity is affected, there's no question about it. But thank you, and I hope that our intent to contemplate deeper also helps other people look into it with a lot more gravity, instead of just polarizing ourselves on one side and having a point of view, which is easy to do. But we need to evade that temptation and stick to the goal of trying to find peace within and without in that sense. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dipti. Thanks.